A lot of people have made this visit. You go over on a Sunday, and you sit down in the chair next to the bed, and you talk about the weather and the traffic and nothing really, because talking is the only thing you've got left to give her. And she watches you the whole time, politely, the way you'd watch a nurse you hadn't met before. You've been going for 3 years. She hasn't known your name for 2 of them. So you drive home, and somewhere on the way you tell yourself the thing everybody tells themselves, which is that she's already gone, and that the thing lying in the bed is her body, and she left a long time ago, a bit at a time, and all of this now is just the paperwork. That's the story. It's in the leaflets they hand you, and it's sitting right there inside the word itself. And then sometimes, about a day before the end, she sits up and says your name. And asks how your son's getting on. By name, the one she's never met. Germany, a place called Hephata, 1st of March, 1922. There's a young woman there called Anna Katharina Amer, except everybody calls her Kev, and she's 26 years old, and she's been living in that place since she was 6. And in all that time, she has never said a word to anyone. Not one. 26 years. She'd had meningitis over and over again, badly, and the doctors back then reckoned it had wrecked most of the brain you'd need in order to think at all. Now she's dying, and everyone in the building knows she's dying, and in the last half hour of her life she starts to sing. In German, clear as anything, a funeral hymn, her own. There are 2 men in the doorway watching this happen. One of them runs the place, and the other one is the head doctor, and this is one of the biggest hospitals of its kind in the whole country. Neither of them is some ghost hunter or a crank, and both of them spend the rest of their lives telling people about what went on in that room, separately, in talks, and in things they wrote down, and when you put the 2 versions together they match. Now I've got to be straight with you here, because this is the best story in the video, and it's also the shakiest thing in it. This is 1922, and what we've actually got is 2 men remembering, and then somebody writing it all down properly about 90 years later, so the bits everybody quotes, the half hour and the hymn and the clear German, that's all coming out of the retelling. Nobody in that room was taking notes. What I'd say for it is that these were 2 serious men, and back then telling a story like that could cost you your reputation, and they kept on telling it anyway, for years, and neither of them ever got a thing out of it. That's not proof, but it isn't nothing either. And Kev isn't the only one. That's the bit that got me. There's a German biologist called Michael Naum, and he went digging through old records with a psychiatrist called Bruce Grayson, and what the 2 of them found is that doctors have been writing this down for about 250 years. Not as a subject anybody studied, just scattered about. A line in a report here, a paragraph in somebody's memoir there, doctors mentioning it, and then getting on with the rest of the page. Strokes, tumors, meningitis, Alzheimer's. Different illnesses in different countries, hundreds of years apart, and underneath all of it the same thing happening again and again, where somebody who's been gone for months or years comes back and knows who's in the room and uses names and remembers things nobody thought were still in there. And then they die. 250 years of doctors watching that happen, and basically nobody putting it together. Then in 2009, Naum and Grayson gave the thing a name, and that's really where all of this starts. Terminal lucidity. Because if a thing hasn't got a name, then nobody studies it, and if nobody studies it, then nobody pays for it. So how often does this actually happen? And I've got to go slowly here, because there are 2 numbers, and at first they look like they're arguing with each other. 2 researchers went and asked families who'd looked after somebody with bad dementia, and they gathered up 124 of these, and in more than 8 out of 10 of them the person got their speech back, and their memory came back, and they knew where they were and who was sitting there with them. So that's what one of these looks like when it happens. But hospice staff over in Britain and in New Zealand, people who watch other people die for a living, they only saw it in about 6% of their patients. 6, not 80. And both of those are true. They're just counting 2 different things. The 80% is what goes on inside one of these once it's started, and the 6% is how many deaths have one at all. So the honest way to put it is that in any one death, it's rare. And about 7 out of 10 of those hospice workers said they'd seen it happen at least once. which is exactly why nobody spotted it for 200 years. It's rare enough that no single doctor sees it more than a couple of times, and it's common enough that nearly all of them see it eventually. So what you end up with is a whole profession where everybody's got a story and nobody's got any data. That changed in June 2018, and it changed in the least spooky room you could possibly picture. There's a government body over in America that pays for most of the dementia research that gets done anywhere in the world, and they called a meeting. And the whole point of that meeting was to work out whether this thing is real or not. And they got brain doctors in there, and nurses, and people who study memory, and people who study dying. Just picture how a meeting like that opens. A room full of very serious people at the top of what they do, sitting down together to go through deathbed stories. And what came out of it was a new name for the thing. And then they did the part that actually counts, which is they put money behind it, 2 lots of funding, to build a proper research program where there'd never been one before. That's the moment this stops being a ghost story. Not when somebody proved it, when somebody agreed to pay to find out. And here's why they cared, because this isn't about being kind to families. This is the thing the whole subject turns on. The way we understand bad dementia is that it breaks things. Brain cells die, the connections go, the person gets taken apart. And if that's really what's going on, then there is nothing left to come back, because whatever would do the coming back is already broken. So in 2019, a paper turns up in one of the big dementia journals, and what it says is that maybe some of this is fixable. Not permanently, but for a bit. Actually fixable. And the people who wrote it said this could change everything we think in print in a proper journal. And people in that world do not talk like that for fun. Think about what that would mean if they're right. Because if a woman who hasn't put a sentence together in 2 years can spend 40 minutes using names and talking about her childhood and asking after people she hasn't seen in years, then none of that was ever destroyed in the first place. It was in there the whole time, and something was just standing in the way. Broken and blocked are not the same problem. Only one of them is hopeless. So what causes it? Nobody knows. There are ideas, and they're reasonable enough ideas. Something fires hard as the body shuts down, or the chemistry goes strange, or the brain's brakes come off, and things that were being held back start getting through. Any of that could be right. None of it's settled. And the best thing anybody has got is an accident. There was a man in a hospital, 87 years old, and he was wired up to a machine that reads brain activity because he'd been having seizures. And while that machine was still running, he had a heart attack and he died. Which means that somebody was recording a human brain at the exact moment it stopped. First time that has ever happened. So they went back and looked at the 30 seconds either side of his heart stopping. And his brain was doing the thing it does when it's pulling up memories. And the man who published it said, well, maybe that's a last look back. Something like your life going past you. And I would love to hand you that as the answer. I can't. It's one man. One. And he had epilepsy, and epilepsy on its own changes the exact brain activity they were measuring. So the best thing we've got is also the thing you can lean on the least. And they say that themselves in the paper, which I like them for. So that's where we are. 250 years of people watching this happen, and real money going into it now, and not one person who can tell you why. That's not a hole in the story. That's why there's a story. I want to be careful with the ending, because a lot of you have done that Sunday drive. So, plainly, this is not somebody getting better. If it happens to someone you love, it isn't a good sign, and families who go in not knowing that end up getting hit twice in the same week. It usually comes in the last few days, sometimes the last few hours. It's a goodbye. It isn't a turnaround. But there's something in it I haven't been able to put down since I read about it. Because for 3 years you sat in that chair and you grieved somebody who was still breathing, and everybody around you agreed that she'd gone, and you believed them, partly because believing them was the only way you could keep driving over there every week. And then for 40 minutes she came back, and knew your name, and asked about your son. Which means that maybe, on all of those Sundays, when you were talking about the weather because there was nothing else left to talk about, Somebody was in there listening. And we don't know that, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that we do. But the people who do this for a living have stopped assuming she wasn't, and in that world, that's a big change. So if you've sat in that chair, I'd really like to know what you saw. Some of you watched this happen to somebody and never had a word for it. There's a word for it now. And stick around, because all my favorite stories start in the same place. Something everybody agreed on that nobody ever went and checked. See you next time.